Am I a narcissist? How to know if you have narcissistic traits? Wondering if you may be a narcissist. Many people have some narcissistic traits without having full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. But how can you tell the difference and assess yourself objectively? Here's a deep dive into the key signs of narcissism and how to reflect on your own possible narcissistic tendencies.
What are the common traits of a narcissist?
Narcissism exists on a spectrum. Here are some of the typical signs of narcissistic behavior. Need for excessive admiration and validation. They constantly seek praise and attention from others to feed their sense of self-importance. Even the smallest criticism can enrage them. Grandiose sense of self. They have an inflated, unrealistic view of their greatness and uniqueness compared to others. They act entitled to special treatment. Lack of empathy. They struggle to understand others' perspectives or feelings. They often come across as cold, dismissive, or overly critical. Interpersonal exploitation. They have no qualms using others for their own gain and will manipulate or charm to get their way. They see relationships as transactional. Envy and arrogance. They are jealous of others' success and often put people down to try to feel superior. They think they are above the rules. React poorly to criticism. They lash out or play the victim when flaws are pointed out. They blame others for their shortcomings to protect their fragile ego.
Do I have an inflated ego and sense of self-importance?
A core trait of narcissism is an overinflated sense of self and feelings of grandiosity. Some signs this may apply to you. Do you constantly feel under-recognized for your talents and accomplishments? Do you crave endless praise and validation? Do you feel entitled to special privileges and exceptions to the rules? Do you exploit others for personal gain? Do you often exaggerate your abilities and embellish your achievements to seem more accomplished? Do you feel envious and resentful of others who get attention or outshine you in some way? Do you frequently put others down to make yourself look superior by comparison? Do you have an excessive need to dominate in relationships and social settings? If you identified with multiple items, you may struggle with narcissistic ego issues. Be mindful of how these thoughts affect your behavior.
Do I lack empathy and emotional depth?
Narcissists often lack empathy and emotional warmth in relating to others. Here are some possible signs. Do you find yourself getting impatient, irritated, or bored when people talk about their problems and feelings? Do you struggle to genuinely support and comfort others when they're going through hard times? Do you sometimes unconsciously minimize or dismiss others' concerns that you see as trivial? Do you have trouble seeing things from other people's perspectives? Do your responses to others' emotions feel scripted or inauthentic at times? Do you feel disconnected from your own emotions and inner experience? Frequent difficulty empathizing could point to narcissistic traits. Reflect on how this impacts your relationships.
Do I need excessive attention and praise?
Narcissists desperately crave attention and validation from others. Consider whether this resonates for you. Do you feel hurt or rage when you are not sufficiently recognized for your achievements? Do you resent others' accomplishments or feel they stole the spotlight from you? Do you surround yourself with people who feed your ego and lavish you with admiration? Do you excessively flaunt material objects, accomplishments, or relationship partners to impress others? Do you spend extensive time curating your image on social media to garner praise and reactions? Is preserving your public reputation or image one of your top priorities? If you strongly identified with multiple signs, you may struggle with narcissistic esteem issues. Consider how to cultivate your self-worth independently.
How do I handle criticism, failure, or mistakes?
Those with narcissistic traits are extremely sensitive to critique, failure, or perceived slights. Consider whether this applies. When criticized, do you quickly become enraged and place the blame elsewhere? Do you have a tendency to perceive neutral feedback as a harsh personal attack? Do you avoid taking accountability for mistakes and shift culpability to others? Do you have difficulty acknowledging weaknesses or developmental areas without feeling deeply ashamed? Do you stew over perceived slights or insults for an extremely long time? Are you excessively envious or resentful when others outdo or surpass you in some domain? Difficulty handling critique with grace may point to narcissistic vulnerabilities. Learning to self-reflect is important for growth.
Do I engage in manipulation or exploitation of others?
Those with narcissism frequently use and manipulate people to fulfill their own needs without concern for others' well-being. Some warning signs could include: do you intentionally charm others when you want something from them? Do you frequently play the victim or make up stories to elicit sympathy or pity from others? Do you use flattery and affection manipulatively based on your agenda rather than sincerely? Do you have a pattern of intense romantic relationships followed by abrupt detachment once bored or unattracted? Do you exploit others' weaknesses when useful to you with little remorse? Do you use friendships or romantic partnerships in ways that primarily serve your own self-image or ego? Frequent manipulative behavior is a red flag for possible narcissism. Focus on developing real empathy and compassion for others.
Do I obsess over fame, status, beauty, or success?
Narcissists place excessive importance on material success, physical appearance, status, and admiration from others. Ask yourself, am I excessively preoccupied with achieving fame, influence, or prestige? Do I spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about my attractiveness or sex appeal? Do I look down on individuals I perceive to be of lower status than me? Am I only interested in romantic partners I view as trophies that enhance my self-image? Do I routinely show off my health, body, talents, or material possessions in front of others? Do achievements feel pointless to me if I don't receive external validation and admiration? Over-focusing on status, achievement, and image to boost self-esteem can signify narcissistic tendencies. Find more meaningful ways to cultivate your self-worth.
Do I lack emotional regulation and impulse control?
Narcissists often battle emotional dysregulation, intense anger, impulsivity, and addictive tendencies. Reflect on whether this fits for you. Do you go from calm to enraged very quickly over small frustrations? Are your emotional responses often disproportionate to the situation at hand? Do you frequently exhibit aggressive driving, yelling, verbal abuse, or throwing, breaking things when upset? Do you make impulsive, emotion-driven decisions without considering future regrets or consequences? Do you have trouble controlling urges or delaying gratification when you want something? Do you struggle with addiction issues, substance abuse, binge behaviors, or recklessness? Poor emotional regulation and impulse control can signify narcissistic personality patterns. Consider practicing mindfulness, distress tolerance, and self-soothing skills.
Do I have trouble with intimacy and commitment?
Many narcissists struggle to develop genuinely intimate relationships and commit long-term. Here are some potential indicators. Do your closest relationships tend to be superficial or emotionally distant? Do you feel relationships anchor or trap you? Do you dread routine or closeness? Do you shy away from emotionally invested labeling of relationships? Do you resist defining commitments? Do you frequently become dissatisfied, restless, or bored in relationships once the chase ends? Do you struggle opening up emotionally? Do you see vulnerability as weakness? Do you tend to abruptly detach from relationships that no longer boost your self-image? Resisting intimacy and commitment may relate to underlying narcissism. Working to develop vulnerability and relational mindfulness can improve relationships.
How can I get support for narcissistic traits?
If you recognize multiple patterns of narcissistic behavior in yourself, consider seeking professional support. A therapist can help you. Understand why you developed these coping mechanisms. Have compassion for yourself while also taking accountability for your actions. Learn to emotionally self-regulate and manage anger impulses. Develop your capacity for empathy and vulnerability. Challenge distorted thought patterns or entitlement beliefs. Build skills to develop healthier, more mindful relationships. Find alternative ways to boost your self-esteem besides chasing status, beauty, or achievement. With commitment and willingness to grow, even entrenched narcissistic patterns can soften over time. You deserve support and compassion.
When does narcissism become narcissistic personality disorder?
Full-blown clinical narcissistic personality disorder involves an all-encompassing pattern of extreme selfishness, lack of empathy, exploitation, entitlement, and a constant need for attention and admiration. For a clinical diagnosis, narcissistic traits must be evident across many life domains, lead to significant impairments in functioning, and not be better explained by other mental health issues. Many people exhibit narcissistic behaviors at times without having NPD. But if your narcissism is inflexible, pervasive across settings, and causes significant dysfunction or distress, seeking evaluation for NPD may be warranted.
Why do people fear being a narcissist?
There is a huge stigma in society around narcissism. Terms like narcissist and sociopath are thrown around very loosely, so it's understandable why someone might worry they are a narcissist. In reality, we all exist somewhere on a spectrum of narcissistic traits. Being attuned to negative behaviors you want to improve on just means you have emotional intelligence and a conscience. Try not to catastrophize occasional self-centered behavior into believing you're an irredeemable narcissist. With self-awareness and care, harmful patterns can change over time.
How can we have compassion for our narcissistic parts?
It's possible to acknowledge narcissistic behaviors in yourself while still practicing self-acceptance and care. Here are some tips. Recognize narcissistic patterns likely developed as coping mechanisms to manage emotional wounds or get unmet childhood needs met. Understand why the inner narcissist first emerged. Beating yourself up will only make negative traits rigidify further. Narcissistic defenses form to protect yourself. Don't attack yourself for them. Progress happens through patience, self-compassion, and gradual hard work, not self-loathing. Healing your inner wounds takes time. Celebrate small wins and steps forward. Negative behaviors learned over a lifetime won't vanish overnight. Even incremental progress matters. Surround yourself with nurturing people who value your inherent worth, not just your talents or appearances. Try to see your narcissistic parts as scared, hurt inner child parts longing for healing, not evil demons. Convert anger toward yourself into care. The narcissistic self is like an injured child frozen in time, adapting in sometimes maladaptive ways to get by. Respond to it with the empathy, guidance, and security it truly needs to heal. The takeaway: assess your behavior patterns. Honestly, but without shame. If you're worried you might exhibit narcissistic traits, the only way forward is through courageous but compassionate self-reflection. To recap, take an honest personal inventory of your typical behavior patterns without self-judgment. Where do you recognize narcissistic tendencies in yourself? Consider the underlying emotional needs driving these behaviors. How might they be unconscious coping mechanisms for dealing with wounds or unmet developmental need? Start addressing negative patterns through therapy and self-help resources. Significant change is possible in time with consistent effort. Avoid harshly attacking yourself or catastrophizing. The goal is improving your mental health, not reinforcing toxic shame. Surround yourself with nurturing supports to foster a stronger sense of inherent self-worth. You are so much more than your behavioral patterns. Monitor yourself day to day while celebrating each small win and step forward. Healing is a journey that requires patience and self-care. With consistent mindful effort, entrenched narcissistic traits can be softened over time. You deserve to live a rich, meaningful life of connection, free from narcissism's constraints. The first step is caring enough to courageously look within.